everyone! Can you believe that August is almost over already? It's like pretty much September. I don't know what happened. The month went by so fast. Today we are going to do our monthly wrap up for August. In August, I finished reading 7 books, which seems like a lot because most of it was me reading Midnight Sun. So let's talk about them. So the first book I finished was The Call, and I still cannot pronounce this author's name. I spoke about this in my last monthly wrap-up because I had been reading it in July and I finished reading it at the start of August. So this book is centered around Irish mythology, where these fairy creatures called the Sheatha exist in kind of a separate realm world thing called the Greylands, and they call the teenagers of Ireland. So the bodies of the teenagers are transported to this land for 24 hours in their time and 3 minutes in our time, and during this time the Sheatha hunt them. And so pretty much the whole book is kind of like this, not battle school, but survival school that the teenagers all go to learn skills to survive the call. So in this book, our protagonist is Nessa, and Nessa had polio as a kid and has since lost the function of her legs. And so throughout the whole book, she is, she's training harder than anyone else because she knows that in the Greylands, when she's transported there, she's not going to have any way to get around. So she teaches herself how to make really makeshift crutches quickly in the wilderness. So pretty much the whole book, you're waiting for her to be called, and along the way, you see all of these other teenagers, her classmates, that are being called, and most of them not surviving. And the tension just grows over time, and you become more and more stressed out about it. So I like this book. I didn't really connect with any of the characters, though, and I think it was more of a case of it's me, not you, with this book, because it was really well written, I thought. The plot and the premise were fabulous. They were so intriguing and really sucked me in. But by the end of it, I just wasn't connected to any of the characters, and I wanted more about why this is happening the way it is. And this is actually a series. There is a book 2, but I'm not really one for series. I don't like to have to read a book 2. I would have really liked for a lot of those answers to have been in book 1, and I wasn't totally happy with the ending. It just felt kind of lackluster. Some of the decisions that were made didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I don't think I'm going to read book 2. But book 1 was fine. I gave this one 3.5 stars because, like I said, it was more of a it's me, not you situation where the book was good, it just wasn't totally for me. The next book that I finished was The Sun and Her Flowers, which I also talked about in my last wrap-up. It was very similar to Milk and Honey by the same author, Rupi Kaur. I know a lot of people have read Milk and Honey, and they are very similar. I think I might have preferred The Sun and Her Flowers just a little bit more. There were more poems in it that focused on her family, and I really enjoyed those. They were kind of like, not really a breath of fresh air because a lot of them were still heavy. But yeah, I think I preferred the poems that were about her family, and I'm glad that she included almost like a whole section of the book dedicated to those poems. I thought that was really great. Also, I tend to not rate poetry books because, like, who am I to judge your art and your life experiences? So I didn't give it a rating, but it's on par with Milk and Honey. So the third book I read was Chariots of the Gods by Erich von Däniken. And I feel the need to defend myself just for reading this book because I know it's kind of absurd. But towards the beginning of August, I was watching a lot of Ancient Aliens. I just kind of had it on in the background while I worked throughout the day. And I really like Ancient Aliens. My husband hates it, but I really like it. And I'm not like totally sold on everything that they say, but I find it an interesting perspective. And this book is kind of one of the foundational texts of the theory. And so I was kind of excited when I found that my library has the audiobook. So I picked it up and I listened to it, and it was not what I had hoped it to be. So I was hoping that it would kind of be more like a textbook where it went through all of these cultures and ancient peoples and pointed out things that archaeologists have found that don't quite make sense, especially things dealing with technology. Like, how could they have built this without the technology that we have today? Those types of questions I find really interesting. But instead of being more of a textbook, it was much more casual, and you could tell that it was built on a lot of the author's opinions, and the structure was very chaotic, where instead of presenting the points by going through the different cultures as like explanations or possible explanations for things that we can't otherwise explain, it instead presented the points and then brought in all of these cultures as evidence to those points. And that's just not the structure that I wanted. And I don't think that it's the structure that is the most credible. And also, it's clear reading this, I mean, the author talks about it at the end, that he is very religious, and his religious beliefs did play a role in some of the things that he said and in the theories that he made. And I was hoping that it would be much more based in science and logic than religion. The other thing is that this book was written in the 60s, and so a lot of it isn't even relevant anymore. And the 60s was very focused on space travel. And in this book, he spends a lot of time trying to convince the reader of the importance of space travel. And that was like half of the book. So half of the book didn't even pertain to the ancient astronaut, ancient alien theory, which is why I picked it up. And so it just wasn't what I was expecting or hoping it to be. So I gave this one 2 stars. So the next book I finished was White Fragility by DiAngelo. I thought this was really good, actually, and I'm really glad I read this, and I will probably read it again because I got a lot out of it. So this book is about racism, and it's written by a white woman, and it is targeting white people. At first I was kind of apprehensive because reading books about racism and wanting to learn more about the experiences of Black people and people of color, it seems like it's better to read books written by people of color, and I totally want to continue doing that. That said, I did get a lot out of this book, so I am glad I read it. The author is pretty ruthless in her explanations. So it's set up where she says, this is something that you are saying or doing that is racist. And then she brings in, this is what you're going to say to defend yourself. And then, this is why your defense is not valid. And that was pretty much the whole book. And it was fantastic because a lot of the defenses that she would bring into it are things that I hear people say, you know, like race doesn't apply to me, I don't see color, all those things that we hear people or see people on Facebook claiming. She really kind of broke it down and made it, you know, so real and tangible and easy to see both perspectives and challenge your own biases and beliefs. So this book kind of felt in a lot of parts like I was being backhanded by the author. Like, it really makes you challenge a lot of your own personal biases that you might not even know that you have. And it was just really constructive, and like I said, I will probably reread it again in the near future. So the next book I finished was, this is so big, The Art of the Animated Series for The Legend of Korra, Book 1. And if you didn't see, I posted a whole video about The Legend of Korra and why I love it so much. And I read this book in preparation for that video to get back into the show. I actually rewatched all of Book 1 this month as well. And also, if there were any details that I had missed, I thought it would be good research going into that video, and I really enjoy it. These books I absolutely love because, I mean, I've rewatched Korra multiple times, and each time I catch something new, and, you know, I appreciate the art even more, but so much work and thought goes into a show like that, and every single frame and background, it's just incredible, all the paintings and details that goes into this show. So I love reading these books so that I can appreciate the work that the artist did even more, because they really put everything into it. So the next book I finished was Midnight Sun, and I was pretty much reading this the entire month. I was very worried that I would never finish this book because it is so long. It is 662 pages. I am a very slow reader, so the fact that I could even finish this month is like amazing. So it took me about halfway through this book before I realized a few things. Now, if you don't know what Midnight Sun is, you probably do, but just in case you don't, it was always planned to be the 5th Twilight book. And it's not a direct sequel, it's actually Twilight from Edward's perspective. And ever since I was first a fan as a little teenage Emily, this was always Stephenie Meyer's plan to publish this book at the end. And then a draft of the book got leaked online and was circulated pretty widely. The author then kind of posted it on her website, I believe, so that the fans who hadn't read this leaked draft could read it with her blessing. But then after that, she kind of lost her drive to write the book. I mean, understandably so. So most of the people I know who are Twilight fans have read that draft of Midnight Sun, but I never did because I just felt like it was wrong and icky. And so I have waited years, at least 10 years, to read this book without reading any of it, except for Twilight, because it's pretty much Twilight. So that's the background going in. Now, like I said, it took me about halfway through this book to understand that it's written for a very specific target audience. If you think that you can read this book instead of Twilight, you're wrong. It doesn't stand in for Twilight. It's very much a bonus book. So the target audience, I mean, it makes sense if you think about it, but the target audience, Twilight fans who would read this book years after the hype of Twilight has died. Fans that are typically in their late 20s by this point and just loved Twilight and still love Twilight and want every little detail and plot explanation and thought process given to them. So that's what this book is. And it does not cut anything out. That was the part that really annoyed me the first half of the book, where, I mean, I'm an editor, and so I was thinking this whole time, like, why is this book so long? I mean, if you've read Twilight, you know that Twilight is already way longer than it needs to be. It has way more details about Bella eating cereal that doesn't need to be in there. And this book is even worse. Like, every little detail, every little thought process that Edward has is in this book. And at first, it drove me crazy. But then I realized, no, the fans who would pick up this book and read it don't want things cut out. They want Edward's perspective on everything. And so you get it. I guess that makes sense because it is such a weird book. You know, I've never heard of another author publishing the same plot with the same characters in the same setting, just from a different character's perspective. Like, maybe a scene or a song or something, but not the whole book. It's such a weird thing to do. And so it makes sense that the focus of the book is not the plot, which is why, you know, the editor in me wants to cut things out because readers want the plot. But that's not what this book's goal is. This book's goal is to give you Edward's thoughts. And like I said, it's just a weird circumstance and very hard to rate because it is different from any other book. So I was going to do a review video over this book, but as I was reading and kind of realizing these things, I don't think I really can, because you already know the story. You already know the plot and what happens, and you already know like the characters, and it's really just about Edward's narration. This book did add a few scenes that aren't in Twilight, admittedly less than I thought. For example, I thought that Edward's trip to Denali would be a much bigger scene than it actually was. It only took a few pages before he was back in Forks. We did see more of the Cullens in this book, especially Alice, and every time Alice is mentioned, the book just comes alive. I mean, she is hands down the best character, right? I mean, I think we can all agree that Alice is the best character. It did make me understand the Cullens more, especially Rosalie. It made me understand Edward more. It kind of helped explain some of his more creepy behavior. At least to me, I think his behavior is still pretty creepy, but it did help explain it. And I really liked Edward in the first half of the book. But, and this is the same in Twilight, I guess, the second half of the book, when he is actually dating Bella, it's just, he's so domineering and just like, I used to think it was romantic when I was a kid, but man. So I'm not sure I'm going to do a review video over this, but I did annotate it as I went through. So if you want to read all 100 of my notes, every little thought I had, much like this book in Edward's perspective, you can go to my Goodreads. I will link it and scroll through and read all of my thoughts while reading this book. And so to summarize, I did enjoy this book. It was nostalgic, but I still think it was too long, and it didn't add enough for it to be as long as it was, in my opinion. So I gave it 3 stars, but I'm happy to have read it. I probably won't read it again, but I enjoyed the time I spent with it. Okay, and the last book I just finished this morning, actually. It was an audiobook of Emma by Jane Austen, and this was the Audible original version, narrated by Emma Thompson. So I knew nothing about Emma going into this. I have never seen any adaptations. I've never read the book, obviously. I've never read the summary of the book. I knew nothing. I just knew that Emma was a character that most people didn't really like, and that was pretty much all I knew. I also didn't realize going in that this version is an abridged version, because I was at one point trying to follow along in my Kindle, and I realized that big chunks of the explanation and narration were cut out, and it focused mostly on the dialogue. So I don't normally read abridged versions, and I probably wouldn't have bought this had I known that, but it is what it is. So not knowing anything about Emma, oh my gosh, she is just insufferable. I learned while reading this that the movie Clueless is loosely based on Emma, and yeah, I can understand the title now. So I understand why people don't like her character now. Oh my goodness. I think it was a full cast production, but it was still kind of confusing because a lot of the voices sounded alike for the characters, especially the voices for Harriet and Jane Fairfax. So I was halfway through the book and I was like, I cannot tell any of these characters apart. I'm kind of lost, and I had to look up the summary and kind of catch up. But since then, the last half of the book went a lot better. I felt like I understood it. I started to like Emma more until towards the end, when she does something that I felt was very self-centered and a horrible friend of her to do. And so she is not the best Jane Austen character I've ever read about. This is only my 3rd Jane Austen book. I've previously read Pride and Prejudice many times, and last year I read Sense and Sensibility. So let me know which one I should read next. I don't know anything about any of the others, so tell me which one is your favorite of the ones I haven't read. And the last book I was reading, this is just The Dust Jacket, but it's a beautifully foolish endeavor. Again, I mentioned this in my last wrap-up. I put it on hold so that I could read Midnight Sun, and I just picked it up again Friday night, and it's going a lot better now. If you have read it, you'll know that I stopped in like page 140, 145, and like the next chapter, something huge happened that I had no idea was going to happen. And so I picked it up and this big thing happened and it just sucked me back in. And so I'm really hoping to get through that soon. It is, what I'm currently reading right now. Also this month, I've had a poll going on my Instagram page of which of my ebooks I should read next. And we're in the final 8, I think. Closing in on the final 4, but I'm pretty sure, just based on the number of votes, that Six of Crows is going to win. So I will most likely be reading Six of Crows finally this month, or this next month in September. Okay, everyone, so that was August for me. Let me know which of these books is your favorite, and also which book you read in August that you loved. Okay, bye! The plot and the premise were all fantabulous. Fantabulous, that's not a word. Okay, Queen Elizabeth. What was the other thing? Was that McDonald's? And so I gave it 3 stars, but they're generous. No, that's not how you use generous. And it focused mainly. Let me know which books